হ্যাঁ, দর্শক ভাই আসসালামু আলাইকুম। আমি আপনাদের এখন যেটা দেখাতে চাচ্ছি জিনেতে আচ্ছা ধ্বংসাত্মক যে মানে ঘটনাগুলো এখন ঘটতেছে, একটা বিষয় পরে ঘটতে ঘটতে এখন সেই বিষয়টা কত বড় রূপ ধারণ করেছে, তারপর তারা ধার্মিক মানে বিভেদ সৃষ্টি করার জন্য আবার বিভেদ সৃষ্টি করার জন্য তারা এই ধ্বংসাত্মক কাজগুলো লিপ্ত হয়েছে বলে সবাই মনে করেন। আমিও সেটা মনে করি। দেখেন আপনারা কীভাবে ধ্বংসাত্মক ঘটনা ঘটাচ্ছেন।
A completely different ambiance. Burned vehicles, a torched gas station, and a desecrated shrine of a Muslim saint. The aftermath of violent protests in a northeastern district of New Delhi. On Monday, tense demonstrations opposing supporters and critics of India's controversial citizenship law erupted, leaving several dead and as many as 150 injured.
Against Citizenship Amendment Act, there has been worldwide protest from Indian communities, and in India there has been strong protest. Now Narendra Modi is bent on gaining international support from the community, so that is why he is trying to utilize Trump to gain an international support for Citizenship Amendment Act.
Monday's clashes were the deadliest since riots against the Citizenship Amendment Act broke out 2 months ago. Critics say the law discriminates against India's 200 million Muslims. It has further stoked fears that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the ruling BJP party are undermining the country's secular tradition in its pursuit of a nationalist agenda.
যুদ্ধ বিধ্বস্ত ইন্ডিয়াকে দেখেন, মনে হচ্ছে যুদ্ধ বিধ্বস্ত ইন্ডিয়া।
अभी तक जो डेथ काउंट है, एक तो पुलिस वाले की है और सिविलियंस की अभी तक 6 है। আসলে এই আন্দোলনটা ছিল পুলিশ সরকারের বিরুদ্ধে, কিন্তু সেই আন্দোলন আজকে তারা ওই সরকার নিজেই ধর্মীয় অনুভূতি দিয়েই এই প্রতিহত করার চেষ্টা করতেছে যে মুসলমানদেরকে মারধর করলে পরবর্তী বিষয়টা ওই ধর্মীয় যে গণ্ডগোল ওই মধ্যে চলে আসবে আর কি, এই বিরোধ চাচ্ছে। এই বোঝানোর জন্য আজকে ইন্ডিয়া সরকার এই কাজটা করতেছে। এই গ্যাঞ্জাম দরকারটা প্রশাসনের বিরুদ্ধে, প্রশাসনের সাথে এদের চলছে। স্থানীয় জনসাধারণ বা জনগণের উপরে কোনো আক্রমণ করবে না, এই তাদের মূল খেলাপ ছিল। কিন্তু আসলে যারা এখন বাড়িঘর পোয়াচ্ছে তারা কিন্তু মূলত এই সরকারের দালাল এবং ভাড়া করা লোক। দেখেন আরেকটা বড় দেখেন
Tension running high in India over Prime Minister Narendra Modi's controversial citizenship law. Violence between Hindus and Muslims has left many dead. Can the Indian government keep control of the situation, and will it consider withdrawing the act? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Thousands of Indians have been protesting for months now against a controversial law that they say discriminates against Muslims. But the tension around the Citizenship Amendment Act has taken a dangerous turn. The capital, New Delhi, has seen days of violence between the communities, some of the worst in decades. Hindu crowds have been accused of attacking Muslims on the streets. Dozens of people were killed in 3 days of confrontations that began on Monday. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for calm. His government has been under pressure since it passed the law that provides citizenship to immigrants from neighbouring countries but excludes Muslims. Modi's critics accuse him of taking a set of anti-Muslim measures and of steering the country towards becoming a nationalist Hindu state. Al-Jazeera's Elizabeth Puranan has been following events. She reports now from New Delhi.
There is a massive security presence across northeastern Delhi after the violence of the past 4 days. At least 20 people have been killed and more than 200 injured. One of the worst affected areas is under curfew, with no one allowed to leave their homes. Now, the Delhi High Court has ordered police to file a complaint against the politician from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharti Janata Party, who on Sunday incited supporters, those who support the citizenship law, to attack protesters, those who are against the citizenship law. The Delhi High Court said that it will not allow a repeat of the 1984 riots when thousands of Sikhs were killed. What we are seeing in the Indian capital is some of the worst violence here since 1984. Now, Prime Minister Modi has tweeted for the first time about what's been happening. He's appealing for calm. But the Aam Aadmi or Common Man Party that's in power in Delhi is blaming the BJP for the violence, because what happened on Sunday was not the first time that one of the BJP's members called for violence against protesters. Aam Aadmi is also calling for the army to be deployed and for a curfew to be enforced in all the violence-affected areas. The country's main opposition, Congress Party, is calling for the Interior Minister's resignation. That's who is in charge of security in Delhi. But despite all of this criticism and the events of the past 4 days, members of the BJP are refusing to condemn their colleagues.
Let's explore this further with our guests. For today from New Delhi, we're joined by Karuna Nandi, who's an advocate at the Supreme Court of India and a human rights lawyer. From Paris, Meenakshi Ganguly, who is South Asia Director at Human Rights Watch. And from London, we're joined by Shruti Kapila, who's an Indian historian and lecturer in history at the University of Cambridge. Welcome to you all. Karuna Nandi, let's start with you. Just how dangerous is the current situation, given the current state of the economy and unemployment running relatively high in the northern suburbs of New Delhi? Does this have the potential to explode?
I think the time potential is over. It has exploded. When you have mobs led by legislators of the ruling party mouthing slogans like Goli Maro Salo Kona, that means, translated, that's shoot shoot and then an expletive, right? And that's echoing something that was said by a union minister, a central government minister. And that was 2 weeks ago, and no criminal complaint has been registered by the police, which means that there's no accountability, nobody's been arrested. And you have mobs now mouthing these slogans, and then you actually have deaths and violence and people shooting, right? So I don't think it's potential anymore. I think this is a pogrom, to not put too fine a point on it. And I think that's a problem, clearly. Today, the Delhi High Court, a bench of the Delhi High Court passed various directions regarding ambulances getting through, because they weren't even letting ambulances, the mobs weren't even letting ambulances get through. It is also true that the violence has risen to such a degree that a constable was killed, and Hindu people have also been killed. But let us be clear that there is a difference when you look at state accountability and criminal accountability of those who are not the state, right? Because there is a power differential there. What we are seeing is that there is something of an absence of rule of law.
Okay.
And that's something that is incredible.
Meenakshi Ganguly, Prime Minister Modi has called for calm. How much responsibility does he bear for what's happening right now?
Quite a bit, unfortunately. The thing is that this is not just one thing. The BJP has been in power since this is their second term in power, and even earlier we've seen provocations against Muslims because the BJP's core ideology is that of Hindu nationalism, and therefore what happens is that its supporters tend to be triumphalist when they win elections and feel that they have political protection for a number of violent actions. So this is, before this there was a spate of what was being called lynchings in India, which were cattle traders who were being stopped in the streets and being killed. So 50 of those died. Then came this law. Now this law in itself is not the problem. The problem is that it's coupled with what is going to be a citizenship verification process, which will in effect could exclude Muslims. Now this is a legitimate concern. Citizenship is a legitimate concern, and one that has to be addressed with great responsibility. Now the Prime Minister said that the process has not really been put in motion. However, his Home Minister has said otherwise. There is a deep amount of unrest. There have been peaceful protests for quite some time. And in an effort to discredit the peaceful protests, for a long time there's been this repeated provocation against peaceful protesters for describing them as anti-national. And then, of course, as Karuna said earlier, this instigation of violence against these protesters. So it's been an escalating process, and one that any responsible administration should have stopped a long time ago.
Shruti Kapila, does this mark the end of the protest movement? These protests that have been going on now for months, was that what this is all about? And can we link it in any way to electoral losses for the BJP in New Delhi?
Well, yes. I mean, the immediate context is that the BJP did not win the local provincial election. But I wanted to come back a little bit on the question of violence and to actually say that violence has been a historical mode of mobilization for the BJP. The last time Delhi saw rioting was in 1984 against the Sikhs. At that time, the BJP had 2 elected MPs in India's parliament. A little over a decade later, on the back of a violent mobilization for the making of the Ram Temple in Uttar Pradesh, saw, as it were, the BJP come to power for the first time in India's history. So this violence pays actually a huge dividends electorally for the BJP. So that, having said that, I think this is also meant to message and send out a very strong message that the protests, which have been by and large peaceful and across the country, should not be escalated into a mass civil disobedience movement, because this is not simply Muslims or Muslim women who are protesting, but a large coalition, social coalition, has come out, whether it's lower caste women, students, and other members of civil society who feel it's because much is at stake. It is actually the basic compact between the citizen and the state that is being changed. It is one thing for electoral majorities to come and go, for people to choose Hindu nationalist government one moment and another moment a left party or something else. But it is quite another when you are changing the entire basic legal structure of citizenship in India. And that is why we are seeing these protests taking place across the country.
Has already begun with a different history, albeit, but it is a process that has already begun there. And passports have been insufficient proof, voting, voters' ID cards, land records, all sorts of documents, even taken together, have been found to be insufficient proof of citizenship. So people are very, very worried, and Muslims in particular are very, very worried because Hindus are being told, and in my opinion wrongly, that even if they don't have the documents, they will somehow fall within the Citizenship Amendment Act, which it is said will provide a route to citizenship because it includes Hindus, and so you can apply for citizenship under that. That, unfortunately, is completely incorrect because it allows people who have been in the country prior to 2014 from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and Pakistan to stay on and get citizenship in a fast-track process. Now, of course, the thing is that if you've already applied to be, and you've said that you're an Indian citizen under the NRC process, and then you go off and you say that, oh no, actually, I'm a Bangladeshi, and yes, I'm a Hindu, but I'm now, now I'm saying I'm a Bangladeshi. So, please give me citizenship under the new act. That's not credible. And how are people even going to prove that they're Bangladeshis if, most have never even been, right? Yeah. So the whole thing is a real mess. And I think it's something that every single person should worry about, because at the moment I think a lot of people are up and out because they think it's about Muslims, but it's not. It is about every single citizen. Every single citizen will have to their citizenship, and in a country that is hugely document poor, and let us remember that women have fewer documents than men, Dalits, so-called lower caste, will have fewer documents than so-called upper caste people, that you will have trans people who have fewer documents, and the list goes on, right? That's a tragedy.
Yes. Meenakshi, do you want to expand on that for me? The government
fast-tracked citizenship rights, what it immediately does is, for instance, the Rohingya, a big crisis right now. There are a million Rohingya in Bangladesh right now. There are 40,000 or so in India. Now, why would this particular group, who have faced one of the biggest persecution in recent history, be excluded? So then it immediately suggests that there is a division on the basis of religion. And that violates the Constitution. I mean, the Indian Constitution does not discriminate on the basis of religion. So it's a complicated process, but in itself, the CAA is still not impacting an Indian. But as Karuna was explaining earlier, of course, the special status of Kashmir, which was abrogated, and the Supreme Court's recognition of the Hindu temple in the place of the 16th century mosque. All this has happened within a very short period of the first few months of Modi's second term. So the only way, I mean, in that sense, the Modi government and the Hindutva forces are going to keep on it, they're going to double down on it. The interesting thing is that close to
Meenakshi, I mean, the police, have they been complicit in this violence?
This violence a long time ago, which does suggest, and as Karuna mentioned earlier, it does suggest, and also because of previous experiences, a clearly partisan behavior of the Delhi police, which has been targeting the anti-government protesters, while acting in favor of pro-government protesters. It has the actions of any government critic can be accused of sedition or any other law, while extremely insightful speeches by government supporters have not been punished. It has taken a court to say that cases should be lodged against people who have been openly inciting communal hate and violence, and therefore this sort of behavior where the political ideology seems to be impacting the police, or that the police is under pressure to not act in the way that it should, which is as an impartial law enforcement body, is really, really concerning.
All right.
In a way, in a kind of violent protest against what is happening. So I'm afraid I'm not going to say these are dark days or light days, but these are difficult days for India because its major foundations are being redone and remade, and people are up in arms about it.
Okay, there we must leave it. Many thanks indeed. Karuna Nunli, Meenakshi.
It's days after the clashes began, and these communities are still burying their dead. This man's friends say he was hit by a stray bullet as he went out to buy groceries. Others have managed to escape with their lives, but only just. Mohammed was attacked by a violent mob as he made his way home from the local mosque.
20 to 25 people started beating me up. The rest were standing by as if they were watching a show. There were thousands behind them. They kept hitting me. Nobody came forward to save me.
Mobs armed with swords, guns and acid have destroyed districts in the northeast of New Delhi. People living here have been critical of the police's response.
We are afraid. We have left our houses on midnight just because they are not there.
The clashes prompted demands for a curfew. In some areas, authorities have banned people from assembling. It is the worst sectarian violence to hit India's capital in decades.
Our Hindu brothers' houses were attacked by people throwing stones, and our Muslim brothers' homes were also attacked. Since my childhood, we haven't heard of such violence between Hindus and Muslims, but now we're hearing this.
There's an uneasy calm across the city after more than 3 days of attacks and arson, with sparring communities left counting the cost of this violent unrest.
Let's bring in DW's Nimisha Jaiswal from Delhi for more on this story. Hi, Nimisha. What is the situation like in Delhi today?
Well, Somi, the situation continues to be tense. There aren't the shocking visuals of running riots that we were seeing coming out of the location on Monday and Tuesday, so it has been calmer. Yesterday, the police took out massive flag marches through the area to reassure people that there is police presence. But once again in the evening, we heard reports of targeted violence against Muslims. The death toll has risen over the last day, and reports say that it could be much higher going forward. There is a lot of fear in Muslims, not only living in the neighborhood, but in other parts of Delhi as well, as there are rumors flying around of mobs trying to attack Muslim neighborhoods. But it is also heartening to see that there are other neighborhoods where Hindus and Muslims are taking out peace marches together to say that they will stand against such violence, and there are also safe spaces and shelter being offered to Muslims who are trying to flee from their neighborhoods, which is also happening. So this situation will have to continue being monitored closely. The riots are not quite over yet.
Nimisha, what caused these riots? I mean, what led to this outbreak of violence? We've seen politicians are accused of sparking the riots with inflammatory speeches. Is that true?
Well, definitely, Sumi. The first attacks have not been documented, so we're not exactly clear what was the first thing that provoked the riots. But one clear piece of information that has been coming out is that there was a BJP politician, a BJP leader, who had come out and in front of police threatened protesters against the citizenship law, saying that if the police doesn't clear them, he will take matters into his own hands. Now, the Delhi High Court has called for the police to take action against other political hate speech makers. This is not new, and hate speech has been spiking from the ruling BJP. And this has also, of course, been a cause of concern because this is now...
Jaiswal reporting from Delhi. Nimisha, good to talk to you.
After the street battle subsided, Wednesday was a day Hindus and Muslims mourned the loss of loved ones after some of the worst violence Delhi has suffered in decades. This is the funeral of Muhammad Furkan, a father of two who was killed when the violence began a few days ago. He was on the way to shops to buy food for his kids.
I received a call saying that my brother has been shot. I couldn't believe it. I was with him an hour earlier. I rushed to the hospital, but I found that he was already dead.
He doesn't know who was responsible. Both sides of the community, Hindus and Muslims, have suffered. Outside the morgue of this state-run hospital, relatives await the completion of post-mortem examinations on victims so they can take the bodies for cremation or burial. This man says his nephew died from a bullet to the neck. He says it was fired by a Muslim. But when he was pressed, he says he never witnessed the killing. The violence stopped after a group of Muslim women were persuaded to abandon their sit-in protest that had blocked a busy road and angered Hindu nationalists, and the government sent in paramilitary forces and rapid reaction units to reopen the suburbs. The death toll is rising and hundreds of injured people are being treated in 3 local hospitals. Many of the dead are said to have died from bullet wounds. It's not clear who was responsible. There was a physical cost too. These are the scarred remains of Muslim-owned businesses in Karwal Nagar in northeast Delhi. Some people have lost everything. The major violence may have stopped, at least for now, but it's been so damaging that the question is, how long will it take communities, both Muslim and Hindu, to heal? And how can they ever fully restore trust? Lawyers have started the legal process for those who were responsible for inciting the violence to face justice. The protests against the new citizenship law, which started in December, were joined by people from all religions and minorities across India. There is a concern now that Hindu nationalists may try and turn this into a religious issue.
See, I am seriously concerned about it. This is the place from where this entire movement is going to be given a religious shape, which is in fact not.
After 3 days of silence, Prime Minister Narendra Modi sent out a tweet calling for calm and for peace and harmony to be restored. The streets are quieter, but the death toll is expected to rise, and the repercussions of what happened here are likely to affect not just the capital. It took police several hours to regain control after a second day of unrest, some of the most violent protests for weeks in the capital against the Citizen Amendment law. The fighting was in the districts of Jafrabad and...
A small woman with a big heart comes between Indian police to protect a fellow Muslim student from a beating. Aisha Rena admonishes the officer. This video has gone viral, and for opponents of India's new citizenship law, her stand against authority reflects widespread anger against a powerful state. She's been in hiding since the incident last Sunday, when demonstrations were broken by police who forced their way into her university library, firing tear gas. Did you ever think that you would find yourself scolding a police officer?
No, at that moment I wanted to save my brother. So in order to that, I wanted to make these people away. If we got saved only because there are a lot of media people came around us. If the media people didn't came, then they will be brutally having and they will be killing my brother.
As for the man she saved,
we are going to regroup and we are going to protest again.
Many parts of the country were and still are rocked by protests against the Citizen Amendment Act, passed into law by a government led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi just over a week ago. He has appealed for calm and rejected claims that the new law discriminates against Muslims. It allows migrants from Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Pakistan to seek Indian nationality, but not if they're Muslim. It comes after Modi won a landslide election campaigning on a Hindu nationalist platform. India's 200 million Muslims make up about 14% of the population. They see the new legislation as part of a Hindu-dominated government plan to marginalise them amid fears that their own Indian identities could be questioned soon.
They don't want to give citizenship to the Muslims. So this is against the principles of natural justice and equality, because you cannot discriminate on the basis of religion in this modern world.
but it is an act of parliament that's been passed by a majority of people that have been democratically elected here in India.
Sir, but the thing is, you cannot let your democracy go into the hand of majoritarian view.
India's Supreme Court has been asked to rule on whether the new law is unconstitutional. Its deliberations may take some time. Meanwhile, at least 5 opposition-led state governments have said that they will ignore the Citizenship Act, setting the stage for more clashes inside and outside the courts. Sam Kiley, CNN, Delhi.
It was a day of unrest in India again over that controversial new citizenship law that critics say discriminates against Muslims. In some areas, police used water cannon and they also used tear gas. Protesters defied a ban on large gatherings. Sam Kiley is on the ground.
This is Delhi's Junta Munta. Like London's Speaker's Corner, a place where freedom to speak is guaranteed. Freedom to tweet, though, has been interrupted. The local internet connections have been switched off. Stifling cyberspace these days is a well-known tactic for India's government when faced with dissent. Marches scheduled for this day's protest against India's new Citizenship Amendment Act in 15 cities across India were mostly banned. Thousands tried to take part anyway. In Delhi, just those boxed in here were allowed to carry on. Delhi's police have been fairly successful in trying to break up these demonstrations, but they have concentrated and allowed them to do so here in the Junta Munta. But the people here are adamant that these demonstrations, the protests against this legislation, are going to continue. Police blocked access roads and cut the mobile internet outside the Red Fort where the Delhi march was supposed to begin. Opponents of the new law, which allows migrants from Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan to seek Indian citizenship, so long as they are not Muslim, say that it's sectarian and undermines India's secular constitution. The government insists that it's designed to protect minorities.
We have neglected the leadership. They are requesting them to disperse peacefully. Yeah, we have full faith in their leaders and they will go. We are telling them
But many remain defiant, accusing authorities of threatening their futures.
Today morning, acting so undemocratically, people have detained our leaders. They have dragged them from the site and they have clearly told students to disperse, otherwise they will face serious consequences.
India's Supreme Court will begin deliberations on whether the law does discriminate against the nation's 200 million Muslims and violates the constitution next month. On the streets here, though, there's no doubt among protesters that it does.
I'm here because I find this act, the Citizenship Amendment Act, completely unconstitutional, anti-people, arbitrary, and against the basic feature of the Indian Constitution.
India's ruling party, the BJP, has an overwhelming majority in the legislature, and it runs the security forces. So it's able to